Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story.
Welcome back to Wayback Wednesday. Today, Joe's rambling about war and bombs and topic. And we had to do a shout out. I'm tired and fighting a little bit of a cold, but well, hang in there. Ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. The shout out is for our friend. Let's see who it is today. Oops, I forgot to set it. Okay. There we go. Alright, today we're racing as robots. I see she stole. I see praying. I see Pedroza. I see Buddy. I see Patty, excuse me. I see the Brits. I see Real Haunted. Mona's sort of in the lead. Is that Mona? No, that's Mass. I'm so annoyed. There's Eddie, and there's Stony, and Journey, and Hillbilly. We got a whole bunch of peoples right there in that middle section. Pinned. Buddy's sort of in the lead right now. We got 15 seconds left. Martin and Sue. There's Spectral, and Carter, and Tour. Carter's currently in the lead. There goes Mass in the lead. Who's gonna get it? Who's gonna get it? Who's gonna get it? It's Contact. Okay, and Paranormal Contact has a great description. Welcome to our channel. They are a paranormal channel. As you can see, they do investigations. So, if you like investigations, go Spirits, check them out. Like, share, comment. Have a good day. Oh. Alright, Mr. Bud, what you got to tell us?
Well, today's anniversary. Look back in time, 1945 on August 9th. No, they weren't talking about me. The B-29 dropped Fat Man.
Oh, no.
An Mk3 implosion-type atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki. It was the second nuclear strike in history, and basically, as they felt, was the one that ended World War II. However, this was not a cut-and-dried operation by any stretch of the imagination. They ran into several problems. The B-29, called Boxcar, was normally flown by the 509th Composite Group. Captain Frederick C. Bach, Jr. and his crew. However, it was decided that Major Charles W. Sweeney would instead fly the atomic mission in Bach's plane. Sweeney's B-29, the Great Artiste, was loaded with blast measurement instrumentation left over from the Hiroshima mission. Due to weather concerns, though, the second strike mission was moved up from the 11th of August, and any attempt to remove the gear from the Great Artiste would cause delays. Well, during a pre-flight inspection of the boxcar, found an inoperable fuel transfer pump, meaning 640 gallons of the reserve fuel would be inaccessible. Sweeney and Colonel Paul Tibbets elected to press ahead with the mission, and on takeoff, the heavily burdened B-29 nearly used the entire runway to get off and into the air. Then in flight, a red arming light on a black box connected to the Fat Man bomb indicated that the bomb was prematurely armed. Weaponer Captain Frederick L. Ashworth and his assistant Second Lieutenant Philip M. Barnes soon determined that it was only a malfunction, and they corrected the problem. Well, the bad weather went ahead and consumed excess fuel from Iwo Jima to Japan, and a missed rendezvous with another B-29 exacerbated the problem. Finally, Sweeney proceeded to the primary target of Kokura, later absorbed into Kikunashi. There they found clouds and smoke originating from a B-29 firebomb raid on Yamagata the previous day. Now, Sweeney had strict orders to bomb, but after 3 bomb runs and increasing anti-aircraft fire, Boxcar diverted to the secondary target, Nagasaki. Now, only a small break in cloud cover over this target allowed the bombardier, Captain Kermit Behan, to drop visually. Fat Man detonated at 11:02 a.m. local time at an altitude of 1,840 feet above the Urakami Valley and about 1,400 feet south of the Mitsubishi Urakami Ordnance Works, where the torpedoes used in the attack on Pearl Harbor were made. The bomb used on Nagasaki was substantially more powerful than the one used in Hiroshima. However, Nagasaki was divided by a number of hills that deflected the blast. Still, an estimated 40,000 people were killed initially, and perhaps 20 to 30,000 more in the days and weeks ahead due to latent effects and injuries. Well, departing the target, Boxcar was dangerously low on fuel and could not divert to an emergency landing area at Iwo Jima. Instead, Sweeney flew onto Okinawa. Now, on approach to the Yotan airfield, and unable to raise the control tower on the radio, the number 2 engine died of fuel starvation.
Whoops.
The B-29 landed 30 miles an hour faster than normal, and the aircraft veered towards a row of parked B-24 bombers before the pilot and co-pilot got the aircraft under control. A second engine died from fuel starvation by the time the B-29 came to a stop. Now, interestingly enough, the Soviets had declared war on Japan on August 7th, although their hostilities would not commence until 1 minute after midnight on August the 9th, Transbaikal time in the east of the Soviet Union. Late on that same day, Japanese Emperor Hirohito announced to his cabinet that he did not believe Japan would continue to fight, and on the evening of August 14th, 1945, Hirohito accepted the conditions of the Potsdam Declaration. World War II, the most destructive war in human history, was at an end. However, as we all know, that this also was the beginning of what some believe, or a continuation of the Cold War that was just starting to warm up. Interestingly enough, the Boxcar actually resides in the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. Now, the thing that made using the second bomb kind of interesting, and I've heard some people report that Japan, after the first bomb, was kind of on the fence. They're like, we understand that you guys could do this again. We'd like a little time to try to convince the government that, this is something that needs to be done so it doesn't happen again. They were reeling from the first bomb. I mean, to be honest, one bomb destroying a whole city was kind of crazy. Japan, to its own right, had been dealing with firestorms already from, multiple B-29 bomb runs up and down their home island. They had dealt with cities like Tokyo, Osaka, numerous cities that were just being turned into char, and the Japanese still weren't willing to, admit that they were done, which is both kind of crazy, but at the same time, Japan was a very proud people. They still are. One of the other things that also came to point for more than a few people is the belief that, after seeing what happened on Iwo Jima, what happened on Okinawa, how physically hard it would be to even launch an operation on the Japanese home island. To my knowledge, I think that they had 2 sets of blueprints. One would be an actual landing, and then the second would be an attempt to take and go after the capital of Tokyo through the plains area. And given the estimates that they had on the deaths that it would take, both for American soldiers, but also anybody's guess on how many civilians would be killed in this operation, I can see how it would have been a benefit to go ahead and use the two nukes that we did. Now, the other side of the coin, and this is where, you get to look at going forward from 1945. At first it started out with the U.S. and the USSR having nuclear power. They both were wonderful, yes, I'm sarcastic, scary ideas that here is something that can obliterate people. And slowly other countries started, coming to the table. England, France, China, if I remember right, India and Pakistan both have it. Israel, surprisingly enough, there's rumors they have it, but they won't admit it. But a lot of countries, have that ability, or they like to do what they say is they have a dirty bomb, which is another scary threat in its own right. It's the fact that you could cause a radiation to a given area, and given how long it takes for said radiation to go away, it's something I can't even imagine somebody would want to use as a concept. But there are world leaders out there that are willing to, put that on the table. If you don't pay attention to us, we could do this. Now, as far as Russia and America go, the two things that both sides worked on, and it's both the concept of, here in America, they were working with accuracy. They could launch off a missile, they could drop a bomb. As the technology improved, we started getting really accurate on where we could send a missile. Take a baseball stadium, take a football stadium, 60,000 seats in one stadium. Well, if you took one of our missiles in the day and launched it off at that stadium, we were accurate to the point that we could hit a row of seats in a given section of 60,000 seats. We were that accurate. Now, the Soviet Union, on the other hand, their belief was that they went for size in damage, not accuracy. Their basic belief was, and give you an illustration which is kind of terrifying to think about, they were, say, to go after Ellsworth, where we had multiple missile sites before the START treaty shut everything down. If they wanted to hit Ellsworth, they were willing to miss by 40 miles. Because with a Soviet-era MIRV, multiple independent reentry vehicle, if they went for one nuke at Ellsworth and they, say, hit Spearfish. Spearfish is 25 miles to the north. The blast would still affect Ellsworth. If they missed and hit Rapid, the damage would still hit Ellsworth. If they missed completely and wound up in Wall, you'd probably see damage wind up at Ellsworth. Their idea was, by getting larger and larger megaton ratios out of nuclear weapons, even if they missed, technically they would still hit the target. They weren't concerned with as much about civilian losses because, we still got the base. Ooh, big joy. Now, granted, with technology, the United States, during the 50s and the 60s did a lot of test shots. You can see some of the video shoots on it for the Bikini Atoll. They had some nukes that went off, and they learned a lot of lessons. For one, they learned that, radioactivity is a real problem when it comes to how long something is going to glow in the dark for. When Bikini wound up getting wiped out, if I remember right, they had to take and move a whole bunch of basically early settlers to another island and then try to rebuild an island. They had several cases where it would go off and the crater under the ocean, down on the seafloor, made quite an impression. And you can still see that to this day in some of the satellite videos. The thing, I guess, that was really kind of wild when they went off and detonated one was how hard it is to clean some of those ships. Because they're thinking, oh, this is an old World War II ship. After they, detonated the bomb, all this radioactive material started falling on the decks. And, scrub all they want, use as much chemical as they can. It's still radioactive. They wound up having several of the boats wound up getting sunk, and they couldn't really do anything, to replace them or fix them or, do any major repairs. Once something like that gets irradiated, it comes down to the same fact that, if something like that happens over here, and then you wonder about how the wind is going to, manipulate effects. Say if it hits Ellsworth, everything going to the east, following the general wind currents, you're talking radioactivity through the Midwest. Not only Wall, but all the way to the Missouri River, across the Missouri River, all the way to Minnesota. It'll just keep going. Some of the other people, they talk about some of the unique ideas that they had for using other types of bombs. They talked about the idea of a neutron bomb. Doesn't damage the equipment as much, but it still kills the people. There's a charming thought.
Very.
But the big thing that it came down to, and it pretty much served the purpose, was what was known as MAD, mutually assured destruction. Pretty much everybody above the 40s has heard of that term, because the basic idea is that if they launch at us, we are going to launch back at them. So thusly, they don't want to launch. And it's also kind of crazy because Russia, at the time, the Soviet Union, they weren't just worried about us. The Chinese were targeting them too. And they're sitting right to the south of the border. And so you've got, multiple countries that either don't trust each other or they have to stay in constant communications just out of the threat. And then the final thing that is kind of terrifying about the whole idea, you look back at, let's take the U.S. for example. In the 100 years before the advent of nuclear weapons, how much evolution has occurred? You went from regular pistol firearms to rifles to machine guns with clips to automatic weapons. As far as air power, you had blimps and hot air balloons that were being used during the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. That way we could spy on the enemy and let them know what the movements were like. A guy from Germany had spotted one of these balloons and went back to Germany, and that was the advent of the Zeppelins. Now, from there, you had the Wright brothers come up with again, it's something up for debate, that made the first aircraft. There was some French guy that apparently claimed to have the first aircraft too now. But, if you looked at what we had in 1901, the Wright brothers flyer, and then you go 45 years ahead and you looked at a B-29 bomber. I remember seeing somewhere where they said that the actual flight of the Wright brothers flyer would have went from one wingspan to almost the other wingspan of a B-29. It had that wide of a wingspan. But then, it continues to go on. I mean, you look at the first time the tanks were at use. The first tanks in World War I, they were big, they were clunky, they didn't work very well, and they weren't very fast. By the end of World War II, You know, the Russians had tanks that were really good. The Germans, the Germans had two problems. First of all, is that they were running out of material to make tanks with, but they also had this grandiose idea of, let's make the tank as big and as heavy as you could. They made the German Maus. The only problem with it was that unless you had, you know, reinforced concrete roads, this thing could actually sink into the ground. It also, I think, had a max speed of like 7 miles an hour. Not very reassuring for a tank speed. The U.S., as far as tanks went, you had to look at the fact that we could mass produce things. And so, you know, we came up with Shermans that we could pop out of the factories at a ridiculous amount of speed. In its way, it was good because our guns, while not very strong, we could get behind Tiger tanks and get that kill shot that we needed. Kind of a trade-off as far as speed and accuracy. And then if you want to go to fighters, you know, the U.S. was able to produce a number of different aircraft, the Corsairs, eventually some of the bombers, the B-17s, the B-29s. But the big thing is that you look at all these different types of weapons that both the U.S. made, Britain made some awesome weapons. Let's hear it with the Spitfires. But then you think about all the time, all the work, all the effort that went into creating the atomic bomb. We dropped 2 of them back in 1945. Thankfully, we've never had to do another one. So there are some lessons that we have learned. We just have to hope that the people that are in charge can keep that going. But this has been Joe, the Bearded Historian. You folks have a good day, and we'll talk to you next week.
Maybe. No, just kidding.